My father called it a harmless fall down the stairs. I was in a coma for 9 months and he sold my company. Now I'm destroying his empire. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was my father counting money at my bedside. Not metaphorically. Actual cash, $100 bills spread across the hospital tray table, his manicured fingers sorting them into neat stacks while machines beeped my vital signs. He didn't notice I was conscious for a full 30 seconds, long enough for me to watch him smile at whatever sum he'd reached, long enough to see him slip the bills into a leather portfolio embossed with initials that weren't his. When he finally looked up and our eyes met, his expression didn't shift to relief or joy. It flickered to something closer to annoyance, maybe calculation, before he arranged his face into concern and called for the nurse. That moment told me everything, though my damaged brain would take days to understand what it had witnessed. The neurologist explained my condition in terms that felt designed to devastate. Severe traumatic brain injury with prolonged unconsciousness lasting 9 months and 4 days. Right side hemiplegia, which meant paralysis. Expressive aphasia, which meant my words came out garbled and wrong. Significant cognitive impairment requiring comprehensive rehabilitation with uncertain prognosis for recovery. She was careful not to use the word permanent, but I could see it hovering behind her professional sympathy. My right arm lay dead against the sheets, fingers curled into a useless claw. My right leg was rigid with contractures from months without movement. When I tried asking what happened, the sounds from my mouth were thick and slurred, barely recognizable as language. The neurologist glanced at my father before answering, and that glance made my stomach clench with an anxiety I couldn't yet articulate. My wife Natasha looked like she'd been hollowed out from the inside, her face gaunt and aged beyond the 9 months I'd been unconscious. She held my functioning left hand and sobbed, telling me she'd thought I'd never wake up, that the doctors had said my chances decreased with each passing month. But when I tried squeezing her hand in response, when I attempted to say her name, she flinched slightly at the garbled sound I produced. I saw something in her eyes that frightened me more than my paralysis, something that looked almost like guilt mixed with resignation. My father stood behind her with one hand on her shoulder in a gesture that seemed too familiar, too intimate for a father-in-law comforting his son's wife. When I looked at him questioningly, unable to form words, he smiled and said we'd discuss everything once I was stronger. The way he said stronger felt like a threat. Dr. Yolanda Park, my physical therapist, was brutally honest in a way the neurologist hadn't been. She examined my paralyzed right side and explained that 9 months of immobility had caused severe muscle atrophy and joint contractures that would require aggressive therapy with limited expectations. She said I'd need to relearn basic motor functions like sitting, standing, and walking, that my right arm might never regain useful function, that my speech would improve but perhaps never return to normal. When she tried helping me sit upright, my core muscles failed completely and I collapsed sideways, vomiting from vertigo while she caught my weight. I'd been a marathon runner before the fall, completing Boston in under 3 hours just 6 months before my accident. Now I couldn't control my own torso. She asked if I remembered what happened, and when I shook my head, she exchanged a look with my father that I definitely noticed but couldn't interpret. Before the fall, I'd been the founder and CEO of Archer Dynamics, a robotics company I'd built from my MIT dorm room into a $47 million enterprise. We specialized in neural-controlled prosthetic limbs, technology that read brain signals to operate artificial arms and legs with unprecedented precision. The irony of my situation wasn't subtle. I'd created devices to restore mobility for amputees and now couldn't move my own right side. We'd just closed Series C funding 3 weeks before my accident, money designated for expanding into direct brain-computer interfaces that could revolutionize treatment for paralysis patients. I had 231 employees, partnerships with 6 major hospital systems, and a product pipeline analysts valued at $500 million. That was the life I'd been living 9 months ago. Now I was learning that version of David Archer no longer existed in any meaningful way. My father, Richard Archer, visited every day during my first week of consciousness, always impeccably dressed in suits I didn't recognize from his previous wardrobe, carrying himself with a confidence that seemed amplified rather than diminished by my catastrophe. He'd been a mid-level commercial real estate broker before my accident, successful enough but not wealthy, the kind of man who drove a 3-year-old Lexus and belonged to a decent golf club without being a member anywhere prestigious. Now he wore custom Italian shoes and a watch I recognized as a Patek Philippe, worth more than his annual income used to be. When I managed to slur out a question about his appearance, he laughed and said business had been good lately, that he'd made some smart investments. The way he said investments while looking at me made my functioning hand clench into a fist. Full story on my channel and linked below.